Saskatchewan's health minister and the Saskatchewan Health Authority responded to concerns about safety and security in hospitals. And why is the opposition calling to end a, quote, snitch line? And again, the NDP raising affordability concerns this week. To give us their analysis, we're joined by our political panel. Murray Mandryk is a political columnist, and our provincial affairs reporter at CBC is Alexander Quon. So, Alex, let's start with you. The health minister, as we heard on the news, Jeremy Cockrell, and the head of the SHA held a news conference yesterday focusing on security in hospitals. And I also mentioned there that the NDP's mentioning a snitch line. We'll get into all of this. Can you get us up to date?
Absolutely. So what we have heard yesterday is that we're going to get an independent third-party review of how staff and patients are protected in hospitals and other healthcare facilities. The province has already put some work into this. They've installed metal detectors at some hospitals in Regina and Saskatoon. There are going to be more metal detectors installed at facilities in Prince Albert and North Battleford. The Health Authority, or the Saskatchewan Health Authority, also plans to hire more security in order to kind of beef up the existing security they have. And we also heard from unions that are concerned about the implementation of this and the lack of consultation. Now, we also heard from the NDP. They have concerns about what they're calling a snitch line. The government is calling it an anonymous reporting tool. This tool is meant to kind of essentially allow people to call in and report where people are suspected of violating SHA policies, code of conduct, or conflict of interest. Now, the NDP is calling this a snitch line that will make healthcare workers feel like they're being surveilled in the workplace. They're also worried about it having a potential chilling effect in terms of allowing healthcare workers to potentially speak to the media or even say something that might be offensive to the SHA's reputation. I will point out for more context that the anonymous reporting tool from the provincial government, it was initially tendered last year. So this isn't a response to any kind of recent events. This is just no one bid on it last year, and so they're reissuing the tender right now.
And so, Murray, let's start with the beef up in security, and we'll get into, you can also comment on what you think about the anonymous reporting tool. What are your thoughts on the government? So we've talked about this in the recent past, trying to beef up security and calls for it to beef up security in our hospitals.
Well, if we need surveillance tools in hospitals, metal detectors in ERs are probably a good place to start. We have them at the legislature in Regina, so I think it's probably more crucial to have them in a hospital where there's greater threats and people are in distress. People are in distress when they go into the legislature, but unless they're a minister, they seldom go in with guns. So, it's basically something that I think is needed. In regard to the so-called snitch line, and I don't want to do the NDP bidding and use their language, but I actually don't, under the circumstances, know what else to call it. Anonymous tip lines, I think we've learned from our social media feed the relative value of anonymous tips and anonymous conversations in terms of stuff like this. The SHA needs to explain to us why they are doing this, because if it's a professional conduct thing, we have the Saskatchewan registered nurses, we have the College of Physicians and Surgeons that can properly assess a complaint given to them. We have the Ombudsman, we have the RCMP and commercial crimes if there is criminality and fraud involved. I don't understand what it is that the SHA is trying to accomplish here, and they're not explaining what they're trying to accomplish here in any terms that I can comprehend or any terms that seem clear to the public as to why this is needed. And for that reason, the language used by the NDP might not be inappropriate in terms of and their suggestions that this might be some way to get people or to cause problems might be valid. I don't think you want a situation where you have anonymous tips about a doctor or a nurse or somebody else or a radio technician or a radiologist, not doing their jobs and based on something that somebody reported at some point. Now, maybe all this would become public, maybe it wouldn't, but just it seems to be a formula for chaos without sort of any real definition as to why you really want to go there. So please, SHA, give us some better reason for doing what you're doing.
And we have recent, examples of high-profile, whistleblowers going into the legislature and being, reprimanded or having repercussions for calling out the government.
Well, and this is the other problem. So one has to be at least a little suspicious that they're welcoming certain snitches and not certain others. Now, maybe that's wrong. Maybe there's a sincere effort, and maybe this is the only way to bring forward concerns and information. But if that's the case, then we have a real problem in the health system that the SHA probably needs to address at another level. So once again, clarity.
And speaking of something the opposition rose this week, brought up, I should say, Alex, the NDP flagging provincial debt levels, affordability concerns. Again, we know in the past we've talked about them calling for an emergency sitting of the legislature. Is this new territory this week, or is this something that they just continue to be highlighting?
I think this is something they've continued to highlight. Obviously, affordability, as you mentioned, is something that the NDP has raised repeatedly. This week, they're attacking Premier Scott Moe, saying the province's accumulated debt is nearly $40 billion and on track to reach $57 billion by 2029. They're now calling Moe the $40 billion man, which is a reference that I'm sure you both got, but might have gone over my head and other journalists that are younger than me. But this is all according to the NDP's own analysis, and the government has really rejected the opposition's argument, highlighting how the province remains the most affordable place to live in Canada. So that's where we're at in terms of affordability in that debate, and we are no closer to an emergency session to address affordability in Saskatchewan, by the way.
So, of course, Alex referring to Colonel Steve Austin and the $6 million man, Murray. I'm even too young for that show.
I have been rebuilt better than ever. I am completely familiar with the reference. Sorry, go ahead.
And speaking of that reference, is this landing? This is something the NDP's been on, and obviously there are affordability concerns out there for the public. So it's something that's being pulled out of the air. But so what do you think about this messaging?
No, it's not landing. Debt never lands. I have a suggestion as to how it could land, and that's pretty easy. You owe me $4,000. Your family owes me $4,000, Adam. You're a family of four. If you look at what we are paying in financial charges at the start of each year for servicing that $40 billion deficit and such, it's roughly $1,000 per person in this province right now, and that's just the debt to service it everything year. So one way to make it land is basically to say, Adam, I'm not going to break into your house and steal your darling kids' piggy bank savings and everything else. But I'm not going to even tell you how you can how you should spend your money on vacation. But before we can hire another radiologist or another nurse or another doctor or everything else, I need money. I need this money to pay for it, and I need to pay for this first because this is the first and foremost expense of government. That is the message that if I was in opposition, and oppositions have in the past, be the conservative oppositions, be the liberal oppositions, be the past NDP oppositions, have hammered on, is that we have to pay this debt servicing charge. And they seem to, and the NDP might be losing the narrative a little in terms of what it is that is impacting people. This is what is impacting people, and it is impacting people. We get into things like, debt equity ratio, and we're not doing as badly as other provinces, et cetera, et cetera. That might very well be the case, but the bottom line is a family of four in Saskatchewan, $4,000 a year right off the top before any other money is spent on anything else. That's what you owe. And I think that's an important message that any opposition should be trying to deliver. And I think it's an important message for taxpayers in Saskatchewan to understand because it's reality.
And Murray, we had a pretty, there was a lot of reaction, let's say, to this speech in Davos from Prime Minister Mark Carney and people comparing it to other speeches from prime ministers in the past. What are your thoughts on what the Prime Minister had to say?
I have a really thick book at home of great Canadian speeches because I'm a bit of a wonk that way. And I'm thinking if that book was ever rewritten or updated to latest version, this speech would go in it because I think it's that impactful. I think it hit on so many levels. It hit on the international level. You tune into CNN on a daily basis right now. They are referring to this speech and referring to it as someone who insightfully talked about the so-called New World Order and what it really means and what it is that is affecting us right now as Canadians. I think it was very impactful. And unless you're, a right-wing conspiracist that's caught up in the words, that Carney used prior to the speech, you are going to see that speech and say, this is kind of really helpful in defining us as Canadians and what we are and what we stand for and why we need to stand up right now. I think it's a great moment for Mark Carney. It was an absolutely great moment for Scott Moe to have been at Carney's side in China, delivering the message on canola and delivering the agreement. But the speech in Davos was basically the articulation of those policies and what the world now sort of looks like. And I think that's incredibly important given what's happening in the United States. We have no idea how long this is going to keep happening in the United States. And I think Mark Carney has delivered one of those speeches that's historically going to be looked at as something that redefined us.
Murray, Alex, thanks so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.